Have we decided who's starting today?
I thought we were going to say something about the elephant.
Okay.
This is GoCast.
So today, we are going to talk about the elephant in the room.
The proverbial elephant in the room.
No, there's really an elephant in the room.
You would laugh too if you could see the room in which we're in right now. So.
As missionaries, when we talk about the elephant in the room, everybody's minds go to one place,
and that's Africa.
There's that. So honestly, though, we all go to one place with that. And today's show might be specifically. I know we've got all sorts of different listeners, and today's show might be specifically for or geared toward missionaries. But I think this is a great topic for anybody to hear, for anybody to talk about. And the elephant in the room is support raising.
Dun, dun, dun. Support raising.
Support raising.
It goes
dramatic music.
Many other names. We call it partnership development. We call it, raising a support team. However you want to package that or look at it, there's so many misnomers or misunderstandings in this subject area, right?
Absolutely.
So when we say, okay, as a missionary, you're going to raise your own support, does that mean that, now every single Saturday you're going to be selling Krispy Kreme donuts at the corner? Is that what support raising looks like? Does it mean that you're going to be a beggar? I mean, you're leaving this lucrative position where, you don't you have a degree in business and now you're going to go and you're going to raise your own support? Are you crazy? That's the kind of responses we get.
I think it's interesting that you just said, are you going to be a beggar now? I'll tell you a quick little something. I have a good friend who's a Go To Nations missionary, and I used to work in sales, and he stopped by where I was, and we chatted for just a minute. This was before I was a missionary. Chatted for just a minute. Talked about he was going to come over to the house. We were going to have dinner together. We were friends for a long time. And when he walked away, there was another guy that I worked with that knew him as well. And he looked at me and he said, "Why are you gonna have dinner with him?" And I was like, "Oh, well, we're good friends." And he's like, "Just watch out. He's a beggar. He's going to ask you for money." Mm. So that's that. As soon as you said that conjured up.
Well, and if you think about it, there's so many multi-level marketing, things that are out there these days and have been out there for decades that, you create relationship with someone and then you pull out the catalog, let's say, you know how that goes. You've probably been on the receiving.
Whip out your computer.
Yes. And so, here's the truth is that I think that today's show is all about bringing some clarity to this subject. You want me to do what? There are so many people that I believe are inspired for missions. They see the lostness of humanity around the world.
The lostification.
The losticity factor, that if a person doesn't know Jesus, then there's not eternal heaven for them. So I don't want to get into theology on that. There is an eternal heaven and an eternal hell. And here's the truth is that they're not going to spend eternity with Christ and God in heaven without knowing Jesus, obviously. And when we understand that, and we understand that Jesus said that there's basically, how are they going to hear unless someone is sent to them? And how will that person go unless someone sends them?
Paul wrote that in Romans 10.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the idea behind that is this, is that we've got to go and tell. And when a person understands that they're not going to hear unless someone tells them, they're stirred, they're motivated until they get to this one little point down in, understanding what it means to be a missionary, where they have to read where it says, you must raise your own support. And they respond with saying, and you want me to do what? Mm. And so that's what we want to talk about today.
As we talk about this, I'm going to be super transparent. I've got a group of missionaries that I mentor and kind of lead. And I speak so confidently about this topic and I give them advice and coaching, but I'm going to be super real. And some of them have never even heard me say this, but I think this is a great topic for me because, Jeremy, honestly, I'm a terrible support raiser. I don't do it well, and there's for a lot of different reasons. So I think today's topic, for me anyway, kind of some of it comes out of that is I'm not good at it, so I want those that come behind me to be better.
Right. Yeah, sure. And I you know,
And
you've never
I
asked
wanna
me
get
for
better.
support, so I can't weigh in on that. I could only assume that you do everything well because everything that I've seen that you do as well. But
That's my Snoopy shoes.
it is your stupid shoes. But here is the truth, though. I will say this, is that the question I have is, does any missionary actually really, really, truly feel like super confident in this area? You know what I mean? People even that have done it for a long, long time. And it's just one of those things that, gosh, there's this uncomfortableness factor in there somewhere. It's just, it's just one of those things that is, some people might call it, they may look at it as like a necessary evil, they've got to do, in order for me to go and win the lost around the world, then I've got to do this thing I don't want to do. And so they don't really feel good about it. But we want to share a little bit today. If we can just unpack this a little bit, maybe our listeners are going to feel a little bit better about this subject.
I think so. What I'd like to do, backing up just a little bit, this Go to Nations, the mission agency that you and I work with, and we've given our lives over to within the confines of our call of God to missions. We work with Go to Nations, and as a nonprofit ministry, we all wear, I tell people, 47 different hats. We have our main role, what I call our functional role, and then there's a bunch of other roles that we fill because they need to be filled. So what I want to do today, Jeremy, is one of the roles that you fill that complement your functional role is you teach on and train on support raising. So I'd like to spend some time today just asking you a couple of questions.
Sure,
and just
let's
get
do
you
it.
to talk about it a little bit. So first of all, the very first thing is when someone says what I just said, I'm a terrible support raiser. What do you say to that?
I would say, you know what? there's first of all, again, I think that that's a common sentiment. I think that you are in good company if you say that, right? And actually, I think the first step to getting better at anything is to come to the realization that, you know what, I need help in this area. If you come to support raising as a missionary and you come from, let's say, you mentioned a sales and marketing background, we know individuals that, may come from, I used to, sell X product or widgets or vehicles or insurance or whatever, and they think they've got this thing nailed down. There's the point where you come into it and this is not the same thing. When I am calling people to come on my support team, when I'm inviting them to have a greater role in the Great Commission, via being on our support team, that's totally different than me selling them a product.
Absolutely. Because, when you're selling a product, you buy my product because my product is better than that guy's product. The honest thing is my Jesus isn't better than that guy's Jesus.
That's right. That's
so
right.
It's not like we're selling anything, so it's got to be different.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, to respond to that, it's just, hey, you're in good company, and that's the best place that you can possibly be, is a place of learning.
Awesome. Okay, so it's not uncommon, is what you're saying.
Yeah,
not uncommon for
not
people to
uncommon.
say, I'm not a good support raiser. So what's the very first thing, when someone says that to you, Jeremy, what's the very first thing you say to them? They say, Jeremy, I'm just not a good support raiser. What do you say?
I say, okay, well, let me give you some tools, okay? Because all of us can improve our skill set, and if you are going to be a missionary who, quote, lives by faith or, lives by support, then you know what? There are a lot of tremendous tools out there right now that you can get your hands on. One of those is a book called The God Ask. Now, this book, written by Steve Shadrach out of the Center for Missions Mobilization out in Arkansas, this one powerful tool that has been in the kind of history with Scott Morton and all kinds of people that have spoken into this subject in Christianity for the last 150 years, has been awesome and has really revolutionized. Actually, why I'm doing what I'm doing is really honestly because of I was in that same boat going, I stink at this. I stink at this. I don't want to do this. And then reading the God Ask, one of the first chapters, the first chapter actually says, takes your pulse on what you feel about fundraising, and raising support. Does it feel like, it's the worst thing in the world, a necessary evil, all the way to the other side of that spectrum where it's the joy of your life, And I have to be honest and say for months and months and months, mine was way toward the left side of that spectrum. It was a necessary evil. I do it just because my organization asked me to do it, not because it's really, I see it as the ministry of what I'm doing. And so I think it's a paradigm. There's a lot of paradigm shifts that need to take place, First of all, one is seeing what does the Bible have to say about support raising, about living on support. There's so many scriptures that have to do with that particular area. And if you're just, if you're not really reading with that in mind, you might just miss it. You might miss little things like the fact that the Bible talks about these women that were, following Christ, and they actually supported Jesus' ministry and the disciples' ministry out of their own means. And so that's just, one of Nehemiah. There's so many stories that we can come and talk about. But here's an excerpt from the God Ask, just to kind of give us a taste of what it might look like.
Okay, ladies, let's talk about proposals. How did your man pop the question? Fax machine? Maybe you were married in the 80s and your man wanted to impress you with his latest technology, so he faxed you a proposal. Maybe it even had a great cover sheet with hearts written all over it. Maybe it was a letter. Your husband was maybe an English major and he wanted to woo you with some passionate words, and he mailed you a letter. Maybe it was even doused with cologne, of course. An email. Maybe you were engaged in the 90s, so your partner thought he would wow you with his new laptop and send you an email proposal. Maybe he even added a smiley face emoji to seal the deal. Phone. Maybe your spouse was very busy and couldn't find time to meet personally, so he decided to call and give you some sweet talk. Maybe whispering tender words of affection, or better yet, maybe he wanted to try out the newly downloaded marriage proposal app on his smartphone. Text. Maybe your beloved just mastered the art of driving and texting at the same time, so he punched out, "Want you to be my wife. Will you marry me?" Or he thought it might be cool to write on your profile wall a romantic proposal so that all of your friends could see it and like it and comment and go, "Aw." So which of these 5 alternatives did your husband or fiancé choose? Oops, wait a minute. I left one out. Sorry about that. Face to face. I know this one is a little outdated. Maybe you have an old-fashioned man who wanted to propose in person. I doubt it, but I wanted to throw this one in there just in case. Okay, ladies, which one is it? Of course it's the last one, face-to-face. In fact, if your husband had chosen any other method to propose, you probably would have given him a definite no instead of a yes.
Okay, so it's great story to hear, right?
Yeah.
So question number 2 on this is, what's the correct way to ask somebody for support?
Okay, great. Well, first of all, there are, according to Dave Anasco, who is our tip director in Thailand. That's a quick shout out to Dave Anasco and family.
The great, wonderful, amazing, world-ruling Dave Anasco.
Amen. He points out in his training that there are 4 different mentalities as it relates to fundraising, right? So some people think that, number 1, tent making must be the answer for missionaries. Paul, the Apostle Paul, at some point of his ministry, in order to be a benefit to that particular city to which he was sent, actually part-time made tents. He took, canvas or the materials of his day, sewed them together, and part of the day, every single day of his life, was spent on making tents to really support himself so that he could preach for free, I guess you could say, okay? He could be able to, in an unencumbered way, be able to share the gospel with that particular city, which is great, which is awesome. Some people think that is the only way that a person might be able to, be a missionary and support themselves, right? The second way is the quote, George Mueller way, okay? Now, I would recommend all of our listeners to Google George Mueller, famous support-raising person who never directly asked anyone, just simply prayed, and God would provide for the needs. Now, this guy was like a super amazing, warrior for God, and had an orphanage. And I just want to read this. Actually, this is a quote about George Mueller. He says, "A wealthy woman came and visited him in his orphanage. After she was gone, I asked the Lord that He would be pleased to make this dear sister so happy in Himself, and enable her to realize her true riches and inheritance in the Lord Jesus, and the reality of her heavenly calling, that she might be constrained by the love of Christ to lay down this 500 pounds at His feet." And it's talking about pounds, meaning, money. So the whole idea is that George just simply prayed, and God miraculously, groceries and, funds would just come his way, okay? So some people think that must be the way. Maybe it's not tent making. Maybe it's just simply asking God and specifically not saying anything, okay? Some people think that another way may be the asker, someone who asks directly, okay? Someone like, I guess you could say, Nehemiah in the Bible, who asked the king directly and specifically for what he needed when he was sent back to Jerusalem. There are a lot of ways that you could approach, fundraising. Certainly, is tent making wrong? No. That's a great way to raise your support. The problem is that you're not spending the best part of your day on your first and primary calling. That's what I would say. If a person says, well, is tent making the answer? Well, also, Paul did not spend his entire ministry on tent making. That wasn't his calling. And so he did that, but only did that in a small portion of the cities that he actually went to. And so it's not really what Paul is saying is the paradigm for how a person should raise their support. The George Mueller way. Should we ask God? Absolutely. Actually, the book, The God Ask, that I mentioned before, we've got to make the God ask before we ask someone to come on our team. Absolutely. But there are also so much, there's so many scriptural stories, etc., that give indication that in asking directly for someone to come on your team is valid. And that comes to the third way, the asker. You've heard it said, you have not because you ask not. When we ask someone to come on our team, we are essentially inviting them. It's not begging. It's not manipulation. It really is taking ourselves out of the picture and saying we're just simply inviting them to have a greater role in the Great Commission, or an expanded role. Or what we're doing in ministry, is our ministry vision somehow aligned with your ministry vision, and somehow this partnership can have some pretty awesome results. That's what asking really is. And then Dave mentions the fourth way, and the fourth way is what depressed missionaries do, and that's they play the lottery. Right? They think, okay, I'm going to go, look, forget this stuff. I'm just going to go scratch tickets, and obviously that's not the best way to do it, is it?
No. I know, and we all dream. We all do. And I know a lot of people dream about lottery and that kind of thing. I actually was talking to a missionary once that was in a bad way financially. And instead of approaching people and asking, like what we're talking about today, they said to me, I'm just going to start praying that the Lord puts it on somebody's heart to send me a large check.
Yeah.
That's playing the lottery. I'm like, and I didn't discourage them to pray like that. I mean, because
Sure.
God is the ruler of all things, and all things belong to Him. But at a certain point, you have not because you ask not. Go ask somebody.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so check this out too. Okay, on the power of asking, did not God send the prophet to the widow of Zarephath, right? And this widow of Zarephath she was about to die, essentially. Like she had nothing left. She was about to make her last piece of bread for herself and her boy before she died. And then God told Elijah to go to her and ask her to basically make him a cake first or give him bread first. And he did. Could you imagine that? Like, you're going and you're like, if God told you to go and ask someone that you saw was about to die, like they were about to throw everything in, and just give up on life because they had nothing left. And God told you to go to them specifically and ask for something of tangible value.
Give me your last. Isn't that's
exactly
rough.
Right? Yeah, that's rough. That's rough. That's humbling. But Elijah obeyed, and then what did God do in that story?
He increased her.
He increased her in a tremendous way, right? So oil kept flowing and flowing and flowing and flowing. Was she able to provide for her family? Absolutely, she was able to, because she decided to honor God with that, right? So she was able to sacrifice. She honored God, and then honestly, God provided supernaturally. So I would say, think about this, that asking is the vehicle by which support gets raised. And in some cases, I feel that asking is a doorway to God's supernatural, miraculous intervention in people's lives. Today we have a very special guest missionary. We have Olivia Reyes, all the way from Long Island, New York. Is that how you say it? Is it the right way?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Olivia's here, who raised 100% of her support. And how long did it take you?
About 6 months.
About 6 months. Wow, that is so awesome. And that really could be the norm. Right, it really could be, and maybe should be the norm. So tell us a little bit about your fundraising journey. How did it start for you? What was it like starting out?
Well, initially, it was scary. Not really knowing. I had the tools through the SRS boot camp, which were tools that I never knew about. I had done missions as a youth and through my church, but through the SRS boot camp training, it really gave me clarity, biblical understanding of what fundraising really looked like. So when I came home, I was a little nervous, but I knew that God had given me the tools in order to fundraise. And so initially, I just, I did what I knew. I prepared my brochure, or I prepared my PowerPoint, those kinds of things. And then ultimately, I just asked the Lord to help me throughout the process. And he did. He did throughout the entire process. There were moments where it was really hard and difficult because God had to open doors where I couldn't see them. But as I used the tools that I was given and had that time with God, he just made a way, and it happened.
Wow. Okay. So you just pointed out two major things. Is that number one, you used the tools that you were given. You actually put into practice the things that you learned. In training missionaries in this area, I see some people that come in the door and they're like, oh, I was a salesperson in my career before I came to be a missionary, or I was in marketing or whatever. And so, these tools, I can just do it. I can kind of wing it and make it happen. And they'll do things like expect that they're going to raise 100% of their support by just sending out a newsletter and including a self-addressed stamped envelope. And then they wait back and then they realize, oh my goodness, this is not the way. And they have to learn the hard way. So tell us a little bit about your, were you frightened when you were using the tools, and you were also, intimate with the Lord, that time of growing closer to him. But was it ever Was it ever scary for you, or were you like filled with faith from the very get go?
Both.
Okay. Yes.
Yes, I had plenty of moments where I felt overwhelmed by it. Moments where I literally would just sit and I couldn't move. I was just like, what am I going to do? But then I would have to turn my eyes back to God, and I would just I would have to get up and go to him, and then he would just help me move forward. But I had plenty of moments of feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah. Okay. So what would you say to what advice would you give to someone who is in that maybe majority of people who feel like they may be called to missions. You know, they've got a good paying job, and they know that if they're going to step across the line and they're going to give their life fully to the nations, that they're going to have to raise a support team. What advice would you give them?
I think my advice would be definitely the perspective of your mind and what you're thinking. When we focus on our own inability and doubts and all of these different things, and we allow those thoughts to overtake our mind, they will control what we do. And so a lot of times in those positions, I would go to the Lord, but also I'd have to change what I'm thinking. I would have to start thinking on the truth. And specifically with fundraising, just remembering that when I get the opportunity to talk to somebody, I'm having an opportunity to invite somebody to join in advancing God's kingdom. And I don't know how many times people were so grateful that I asked to meet with them because they had never experienced anything like that before. And all you need to do was ask. You know, they just didn't know. So definitely the mind, protecting your mind, making sure you're dwelling on the truth and not allowing the lies to kind of come in and take you off course.
Yeah, you know, I just came out of a support appointment this morning, right? Today before we do this recording. And, you know, I was even, I'm a trainer for this, but I'm recognizing the truth of exactly what you're saying. Of it. Actually, when we're there and inviting people on the team, you know, there's a spiritual battle that's taking place, right? Even in that moment, you know, because I guess it's just like that with all of our walk with Christ. You know, there are times when we've got to discipline our minds. You know, there are times when we've got to just simply, you know, put on the full armor of God, exactly like, you know, Ephesians 6 tells us, and guard ourselves, right? So that we can walk out in faith with full confidence what he's asked us to do. And, you know, one of the things that I found out, Olivia, is that when we do the two things you said, when we use the tools that we're given, right? And when we grow in our intimacy with the Lord, that we see like miracles happen. And for you getting to fully funded in 6 months, that really was a miraculous thing, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, very good, very good. Okay. You also mentioned SRS Boot Camp. What is that?
So SRS Boot Camp was a part of my orientation, Go to Nations, and it was a 3-day training where we were able to have tools given to us, meaning like not only the tools, but we actually practiced it in the classroom, which I liked. We had a lot of role playing, which some people didn't really like, but it was a lot of fun, and it just allowed us to understand what it would look like in a meeting, so that when we went home, we could really take that and kind of mold it to what we would like to do with our partners.
SRS stands for Support Raising Solutions, and as a ministry, Go to Nations is partnered with Support Raising Solutions, which is a ministry of the Center for Missions Mobilization out of Arkansas. And so we do want to invite our listening audience to go to supportraisingsolutions.org. We've partnered with them and seen some dramatic, miraculous even results as is kind of an outflow of that partnership with that ministry. So again, it's so good to have Olivia here with us today.
Okay, so one more question for you, Jeremy. We talk about asking and asking directly. How does one do that, asking directly? What would be the best way to ask somebody directly?
Okay. So referencing back to Abigail Smith earlier, reading that section from the God Ask about, you know, the marriage proposal, you know, you wouldn't You wouldn't ask via text, right? You wouldn't send a fax. Of course, I don't know the last time I actually used a fax machine, but you definitely wouldn't do that. When there is something that is really critically important in a person's life, right? There's a deep question. You're going to look that other person in the eye, and you're going to have eye contact, and you're going to ask the question clearly and directly. You're not going to ask with, you're not asking in a sheepish way. You're not saying, well, would you maybe consider the potential possibility of just maybe, supporting us a little bit as we go and accomplish the gospel work around the world. You don't want to, you'd say that's the first thing you don't want to do. You don't want to ask via some other mode of communication other than face-to-face, and you don't want to make your ask something ambiguous. You want it to be straightforward. You want it to be clear. You want to make contact with that person on a face-to-face, eyeball-to-eyeball kind of way, and you want to simply invite them onto your team.
I think that's good. So what we did today is we just covered like 3 real quick little things that I think will help our missionaries. And I think it's good for our listeners that aren't missionaries to hear us have this conversation so they have a greater understanding. So what I kind of want to do is just kind of round things out a little bit today. And there's a couple of things that you have said that I kind of want to give some clarity to. And one that I want to cover is you keep on saying the word partner. I want to touch on that because of a conversation I had today with somebody, and then you say team. So I want you to talk about that. Does that sound good to you?
Sure.
So when we talk about partners and partnership, the reason why we say partner is because we believe in this, that it's more than just a check. It's more than just an electronic withdrawal. It's more than just money exchange between 2 people, because when it's just that, it's just business. You've got a business transaction and it's done. And you know what? There are times that it's kind of like that, but we're looking for more than that, because what we're doing is we are taking the gospel of Jesus Christ to the world. This is ministry. And what we're doing is we're asking people to partner with us, become part of that ministry. And we believe that people on both sides of this partnership have responsibilities. See, in a business transaction, the transaction happens, you give me money, I give you service, it's done. There's not really a lot of responsibility. But in a partnership, there's solid responsibilities on both sides. I had a partner talk to me today about some things going on, and I said to them, I was like, I wish you would have told me that all this was going on in your life right now, because in our partnership, my responsibilities kick in, and I need to be praying for you. I need to be supporting you. I need to be stepping in the gap for you. So it's why we say partnership is because it's a two-way street. I'm not just standing there in front of you with my hand out. We are standing shoulder to shoulder, and we're doing this thing together. I may be the one getting on the airplane and preaching in the churches, but you are with me because you sent me. And when I'm home or wherever I am in the world and you need prayer, you need someone to stand in the gap, we're there together, shoulder to shoulder, and I'm laboring with that and praying over you because that's what you need. It's a partnership. It's both of us bringing something to the table and mutually benefiting each other for the cause of the gospel. That's why at least in my mind, that's why we say partnership.
That's good. It's a good way to put that, okay? And if you look at it, a partnership means that we are, the Corinthians, Paul gives the analogy of being yoked together, right? There's something, he uses marriage in that terminology. There's something about being in a partnership that is very powerful and can accomplish more than either one of them can do on their own, The truth is, in gospel work, the Great Commission is written in such a way as to, it's imperative for all of us in the kingdom of God to go and make disciples, right? According to, Matthew chapter 28, verses 19 and 20. We are to go and make disciples. Well, either you're one who goes or you're one who sins. And a person cannot go unless they're sent. And so, really, truly, all of us have an equal role in that. And that partnership between sender and sent one is absolutely vital and biblical and the way that God designed it. Just like God designed a marriage between a man and a woman. That same kind of partnership is what produces fruit.
That's great.
And children.
That's great. And children. But this way, we're just producing spiritual children.
Only, that's exactly, just to be clear.
Well, I think today has been super, super beneficial. It was good for me just to have the conversation as my wife and I are really focusing in on we need to do this a whole nother level of this, and it's time to really for us to push forward with this. So it's a good conversation just for me. So for selfish reasons, good show, Jeremy.
Yeah.
But I think it's good for all of us, whether you're a missionary, whether you're the goer, or whether you're the supporter, meaning you're the sender.
Right.
One goes and one sends, and we do this together. We really partner together. So
let me also say this too about that. Just as also transparency, one of the reasons why I have just latched onto really the facilitation of how we do this in our own organization. One of the main reasons is because, you know what, if I'm teaching this, then it holds me accountable, and even if I don't want to get out there and do it, you know what, I have to do it. I do not have a choice, You
better deliver, buddy.
Better deliver, right? And so there's a lot riding on that. And I will say this, is that, one of the easiest things for me as a missionary, one of the easiest things for me to do is to focus primarily on the assignment and forget the support team that's helping me get to that assignment. It is so easy for me to look straight on the ministry of, preaching the gospel and, winning and mobilizing. It's so easy because that's what I love to do. And then sometimes I forget that my partnership team, my support team, is just as much a part of my ministry as me preaching the gospel in Africa. Good. And so it really is absolutely, we go when it's like when I go, we go.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. So with that, I just want to say, Jeremy, thank you. And, when you close out the show, you always say thank you to our host, Chris, and then you mention yourself. I'm not going to thank me, but I will thank you today. Thank you to Justin Walford, our amazing, illustrious producer extraordinaire. Thank you to Abigail Smith. Thank you to Olivia Reyes, who is in Thailand right now in her apprenticeship. Thank you, Dave Anasco, for sharing your teaching method. Thank you to all of you listening, and go win the world.
If you would like more information on raising a personal support team, I highly recommend you check out supportraisengsolutions.org. That is supportraisengsolutions.org. That's where you can find more information on the God Ask that we've mentioned here in this podcast.
GoCast is the official podcast of Go2Nations, a mission sending agency reaching the Americas, Eurasia, Africa, and Southeast Asia with missions opportunities available now. Want to know more? Check out our website at go2nations.org.